My mother snapped that my children had eaten before when they were denied food at a family dinner I was paying for. Her husband smirked and told me to pack snacks next time. They thought I would just take the humiliation. So I discreetly texted the waiter, took the microphone, and made an announcement that left them with a 5-figure bill they couldn't pay. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The clinking of silver against porcelain was the loudest sound in the private dining room, a sharp, metallic ring that seemed to echo the hollow feeling in my stomach. I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. Beside me, my 8-year-old son, Leo, was tracing the elaborate pattern on the tablecloth, his little brow furrowed. My 6-year-old Maya had her chin propped in her hand, her eyes wide as she watched the waiters move with silent, practiced grace. They were serving the first course, a delicate, towering salad of microgreens, edible flowers, and poached pears to my sister Chloe's family, and to my mother, Margaret. The plates were placed with a flourish. My mother picked up her fork immediately. My brother-in-law, David, let out a low, appreciative whistle. My children watched and waited. No plates came for me. No plates came for Leo or Maya. I, Alina, had spent 3 months planning this night. 3 months of phone calls with the venue, of curating this exact 3-course menu, of coordinating with the florist, of putting down a staggering deposit on my own credit card to secure this opulent room at Lucille, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. All for my mother's 60th birthday. A milestone. A night that was, according to my own detailed project plan, supposed to be perfect. As a senior project manager, my entire career was built on foreseeing and mitigating every possible risk. Except, it seemed, the ones seated at my own table. Leo, ever the literal one, finally whispered, "Mommy, is our food coming?" His voice was small, but in the relative quiet of the room, it carried. David, my brother-in-law, paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. He looked over at Leo and then at me, a lazy, satisfied smirk spreading across his face. He was a man who had never worked a hard day in his life, coasting on my sister's indulgence and my mother's blatant favoritism. Before I could form a gentle, reassuring answer for my son, my mother, Margaret, set her fork down with a sharp clack. She didn't look at Leo. She looked directly at me. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Alina," she snapped. Her voice was cold, sharp as shattered glass. "They'll be fine, they've eaten before." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just the casual cruelty, it was the public delivery. It was the fact that my children were right there, hearing her dismiss their hunger, dismiss them as an inconvenience. Maya's lower lip began to tremble. Leo just stared at his grandmother, his expression one of pure, uncomprehending hurt. David let out a short, barking laugh. He pointed his fork at my children, the smirk never leaving his face. "She's right, you know," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "They look a little shell-shocked. Next time, Alina, pack them snacks, like you're going to the zoo." He and my sister Chloe tittered. Chloe, at least, had the decency to hide her smile behind her napkin, but her eyes, so like my own, crinkled with amusement. I said nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my children. I didn't point out the sheer, staggering audacity of their behavior. My gaze dropped from my mother's cold, dismissive face to the pristine white tablecloth. The room was spinning. All the years of trying, of paying, of organizing, of swallowing my pride, all of it coalesced into a single, terrible point of clarity. I had been stressed all week, running on fumes to make this night flawless for her, and in one breath she had shown me exactly what I was worth. What my children were worth. Nothing. I felt a hot, stinging pressure behind my eyes, but I refused to cry. Not here, not in front of them. Instead, a different feeling began to surface. It was a cold, quiet calm that settled over me, pushing the hurt and humiliation deep, deep down. It was the feeling I got at work just before a high-stakes product launch, when the servers were crashing and the team was in a panic. It was the moment my brain shifted from emotion to execution. My mother and sister were now discussing the wine pairing. David was telling an animated story to his own, well-fed children. My family, my real family, was invisible. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my purse and slid my phone onto my lap, angling the screen away the table. I unlocked it, my fingers moving with steady, practiced precision. I opened my text messages and found the name I was looking for, Marco, Lucille event lead. He and I had exchanged dozens of texts over the last few weeks. Hi Marco, confirming the high chairs. Hi Marco, can we ensure the 2018 Cabernet is decanted? Hi Marco, here is the final guest list. I typed a new message. My thumbs were perfectly steady. Hi Marco, this is Alina in the private dining room. I have a rather unusual request. I need you to please bring the wireless microphone for the sound system to my table. Please hand it directly to me. Alina. I hit send. A moment later, 3 blue dots appeared, then a reply. Of course, Ms. Alina. Is everything all right? I smiled, a thin, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. Everything is perfect. Just one more thing. I need you to prepare the final itemized bill for the entire event, and I need you to find out if the credit card I used for the deposit can be adjusted. The blue dots reappeared, paused, then started again. I'll be there in 2 minutes with the microphone. I will speak to my manager about the bill immediately. I slipped the phone back into my purse. I looked up. My mother was laughing at something David said. I leaned over to my children. Mommy has a surprise, I whispered. Just wait. Leo and Maya, bless their innocent hearts, looked at me with trusting eyes. They thought the surprise was food. In a way, it was. It was food for the soul. The betrayal wasn't just the lack of food. It was the years of being treated as a second-tier family, and this humiliation was simply the final, unforgivable straw. The 2 minutes it took for Marco to arrive felt like an eternity. In that small pocket of time, the main courses were served to the A-list side of the table. Aromatic steam rose from plates of duck confit and pan-seared scallops. The sounds of enjoyment, the murmurs of, "Oh, this is divine," from Chloe, the satisfied grunts from David, were a fresh wave of insults. My children sat in a bubble of stunned silence, their hunger now replaced by a creeping, awful understanding that they were being deliberately excluded. Maya had shuffled her chair closer to mine, her small hand gripping my sleeve. Leo was blinking rapidly, fighting back tears with a fierce pride that just shattered my heart. He was trying to be a big boy, but he was just a little boy who had been publicly shamed by his own grandmother. I felt a rage so cold and pure it was almost peaceful. It was the end of something. The end of my lifelong, pathetic quest for a single crumb of approval from a woman who was incapable of giving it. I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy her love, paying for family vacations I was subtly excluded from, hosting holiday dinners where my cooking was openly criticized, and now, funding this extravagant charade of a celebration. All it had earned me was the privilege of watching my children be humiliated. My mother, Margaret, caught me watching her. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look ashamed. She raised an eyebrow, a silent, imperious question. "What are you staring at?" Her expression was one of mild irritation, as if I were the one being rude. As if my children's hunger was an accusation, and it was bothering her. It was in that look that the last thread of my hope severed. She wasn't just being cruel, she was being defiant. She was daring me to challenge her. David, catching the silent exchange, chimed in again. "Seriously, Alina, you're spoiling the mood. If they're that hungry, take them to the lobby for some bar nuts. This is a private party, not a daycare." "David, be nice," Chloe said, but she was smiling. She was the golden child, the one who had always been protected. She had married this oaf, David, and my mother had welcomed him with open arms, funding their lifestyle, paying for their house, and now fating them at a party I was paying for. They were a unit. A cozy, impenetrable club of 3, plus their children. And then there was me, the outlier, the reliable, responsible, successful one, the one who was always too sensitive, too serious, too independent, the one who had built her own life, her own career, her own family without a single handout from them. And for that, I was punished. My success was an insult to her, my independence a rejection. My children, by extension, were second class. I just gave David a small, tight smile. I didn't engage, I didn't defend, I simply watched him. I watched the way he sipped the expensive wine I had selected. I watched the way he confidently ordered another bottle from a passing waiter, as if he were the host. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made. The missed vacations with my own husband before he passed, because I was diverting funds to help my mother with a financial emergency that turned out to be a down payment on a new car for Chloe. The weekends spent balancing my demanding job with single parenthood, while my mother was too busy to babysit my children, but always available to take Chloe's kids to the theater. They had all grown so comfortable with the arrangement. I was the family ATM, the reliable planner, the emotional punching bag, and they had forgotten one crucial thing. The person who writes the checks is the one with the power. Just then, the door to the private room opened. Marco, the event lead, walked in. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a black suit, his face a perfect mask of professional neutrality. He walked straight to our table, past my mother, and stopped directly beside me. "Ms. Alina," he said, his voice quiet but clear. He was holding a sleek, silver wireless microphone. "You requested this." The chatter at the table died instantly. All eyes snapped to me, then to the mic. My mother looked bewildered. "Alina, what on earth is this? Are you singing?" David snorted. "God, I hope not. Don't quit your day job." I took the microphone from Marco. It felt cool and heavy in my hand. I gave him a small, grateful nod. He held my gaze for just a fraction of a second, and in that look I saw a flicker of understanding. He had seen it all. He had seen my children being ignored. He had seen the plates delivered to one side of the table and not the other. He knew. "Thank you, Marco," I said. My voice was calm. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping softly against the polished floor, and I stood up. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands were shaking just slightly, but I gripped the microphone tightly. This was it. There was no going back. The project plan was officially out the window. This was no longer a party. It was a demolition. "A speech, how lovely," Chloe chirped, clapping her hands together, oblivious. "Mom, she's making a speech for you." My mother preened, a self-satisfied smile gracing her lips. She thought this was for her. She thought I, her dutiful, disappointing daughter, was about to stand up, humiliated and unfed, and sing her praises. "Yes," I said, my voice ringing out, amplified just slightly by the speaker system. "I have an announcement to make." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd had all night. An announcement no one at this table will ever forget. To understand why I stood there, microphone in hand, ready to detonate my entire family, you have to understand my mother, Margaret. My mother didn't just have a favorite child. She had a golden child, Chloe, and she had me. I was the practice one, the one who was too much like my father, quiet, methodical, and independent. My father had passed away when I was in college, leaving me with a small inheritance that I had carefully, responsibly used for my education and a down payment on my first condo. My mother had resented that inheritance from the day I got it, as if his provision for me was a direct theft from her. Chloe, on the other hand, was my mother's echo. She was bubbly, irresponsible, and utterly dependent, which my mother adored. Margaret thrived on being needed, on being the puppet master. Chloe was her perfect, willing puppet. My entire life was a series of me trying to earn my place. I got straight A's, Chloe struggled. My mother spent hours comforting Chloe over a B, while my acceptance into a top university was met with a shrug and a "well, don't get a big head." I became a project manager, climbing the ranks at a top tech firm through sheer grit and talent. I bought my own home. I managed my own finances. Chloe, meanwhile, bounced between part-time jobs, and my mother co-signed on a lavish apartment for her. Then came David. Chloe brought David home, and I knew from the first handshake that he was a parasite. He had the soft hands of a man who'd never lifted anything heavier than a champagne flute and an air of entitlement that was breathtaking. He saw my mother not as a matriarch, but as a bank. And he was smart. He immediately identified me as a threat to his new, comfortable life. He recognized that my independence made Chloe's dependence look pathetic. So, he and my mother formed an unspoken alliance. Their favorite pastime was to belittle me, but in a way that was always just plausible enough to be denied. "Elena, that's a lovely dress," my mother would say at Christmas. "It's so practical, you always choose such sensible things." "Don't be so sensitive, Elena," David would laugh when I'd object to a joke about my boring job. "I'm just trying to get you to loosen up, you're always so wound up." And Chloe just floated along in their wake, happy to be the center of their universe, never once standing up for me or my children. My kids, Leo and Maya, were the secondary victims. My mother treated them like an obligation. Chloe's children, however, were spirited and brilliant. My mother was grandma. To my children, she was Margaret, at her own insistence. This 60th birthday party was supposed to be my final, grand attempt. A desperate, pathetic part of me thought that if I threw her the party of a lifetime, at the most exclusive venue, with the finest food, all on my dime, she would finally see me. She would finally acknowledge me. I had presented the idea to her a few months back. "Mom, for your 60th, I want to do something truly special," I'd said, showing her the brochure for Lucille. Her eyes had lit up. "Oh, Elena, this is wonderful. But are you sure you can afford it? David and Chloe were just saying they were going to take me to that little Italian place they like." "I can afford it," I'd said, puffing up with pride. "I want to host, for you, for the whole family." "Well, if you're sure," she'd mused. "It would be a shame to waste such a beautiful room. I'll tell Chloe she can invite David's parents, too, and his sister. It's only fair since you're booking the whole room." And just like that, my gesture became her party. The guest list ballooned from 10 to 20, the cost doubled, and I, like a fool, just nodded and paid the deposit. I was so hungry for her approval that I was willing to pay any price. Now, standing in that room, the microphone warm in my hand, I saw the full, grotesque picture. This wasn't a party I was hosting. I was the caterer, the financier, the jester, and the menu I had so carefully selected. The one David was currently shoveling into his mouth, it had been a joint effort. "Oh, Elena, don't be a bore," my mother had said when I suggested a more inclusive menu. "Chloe and David and I have already picked out what we want. It's all set. You just handle the booking." I had never even seen the final menu. I had just paid. I looked at David, his smug, arrogant face flushed with expensive wine. I looked at Chloe, blissfully unaware, touching up her lipstick. And I looked at my mother, Margaret, who was staring at me with an expectant, slightly annoyed expression, as if to say, "Get on with it, the entertainment is boring me." I pressed the small on button on the side of the microphone. A soft thump echoed through the room's speakers. "If I could have everyone's attention, please," I said. My voice was amplified now. It was strong, clear, and utterly devoid of the tremor I felt in my chest. "I'm so glad you could all be here tonight to celebrate this momentous occasion." My mother beamed. She positively glowed, raising her glass to me in a mock toast. "This night," I continued, "has been months in the planning. As many of you know, I, as a project manager, believe that success is all in the details. The right venue, the right flowers, the right menu." I paused, letting that last word hang in the air. David had stopped eating. His eyes narrowed slightly. He was sensing the shift. He was the first one to realize this wasn't on the approved script. "And I spared no expense," I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. "I wanted to give my mother, Margaret, the 60th birthday she truly, truly deserves." The shift from passive victim to active strategist wasn't a conscious decision. It was a reflex. It was the project manager in me taking over, identifying a catastrophic failure and immediately pivoting to damage control. Only in this case, the damage was my entire relationship with my mother, and the control was about taking back my power, my dignity, and my finances, all in one clean, devastating move. My investigation had been happening for years in a way. Every dismissive comment, every holiday I paid for, every loan that was never repaid, these were all data points. I had all the evidence I needed, stored in a mental file labeled family betrayal. Tonight was simply the final, irrefutable piece of data. When I had texted Marco, I wasn't just asking for a microphone. I was activating my clever trap. The trap wasn't something I had planned. It was something they had built themselves, brick by brick, with their own greed and entitlement. The trap was the simple, beautiful fact that my name, and only my name, was on the contract. My credit card was on file for the deposit, and my credit card was the one they expected to pay the astronomical final bill. They had assumed I would just swallow the humiliation and the cost, as I always had. They had, as I'd thought earlier, forgotten who held the power. As I stood there, microphone in hand, I let my gaze travel over the room. I saw David's parents looking confused. I saw his sister looking bored. Then I looked at my own table. "I've spent a great deal of my life seeking my mother's approval," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I thought that if I was successful enough, generous enough, perfect enough, I might one day earn it." "Elena," my mother warned, her smile faltering. The color was draining from her face. She knew my serious tone. This was the tone I used for business, not for fawning speeches. "For example," I continued, as if she hadn't a spee. "Oaken, I've been hosting the family Christmas for 10 years. Hosting is a funny word, isn't it? It usually implies a partnership. But for me, it meant planning, shopping, cooking, and cleaning for 20 people, only to have my mother and David criticize the seasoning on the turkey while Chloe sat on the sofa, checking her phone. Chloe's head snapped up. "Elena, what are you doing?" she hissed. "I'm giving my speech, Chloe," I said sweetly. "Please don't interrupt." I turned my attention to David. And David, my dear brother-in-law, do you remember last summer at the lake house? The one I rented for the entire family? You thanked me for letting you all come, and then you and my mother spent the entire week discussing how much nicer the houses on the other side of the lake were. And how sensible it was of me to rent a place with a rustic, I believe that was your word, kitchen. David's face was turning a fascinating shade of blotchy red. "Now, you listen here." He started to bluster, halfway out of his chair. "Sit down," I said. It wasn't a request. My voice, amplified, cracked through the room. "You are a guest, and you're being rude." He froze, stunned into silence by my tone. "This is my party, after all," I said, letting a small, cold smile touch my lips. "I'm the host. I'm paying. Or at least that was the assumption." This was the moment. The clever trap was set. The door to the private room opened again, very quietly. It was Marco. He wasn't carrying a microphone this time. He was holding a leather-bound bill folder. He caught my eye and gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. My text message had been understood. My request had been granted. The trap was armed. "I find it fascinating," I said, turning my gaze back to my mother, "that a host can be so easily forgotten. That a host and her children can be treated as inconveniences, as lesser-thans, as people who, and I quote, have eaten before and should pack snacks next time." A collective gasp went up from the other side of the table. David's parents looked horrified, their eyes darting between my hungry children and my mother. "My children," I said, my voice finally cracking with the emotion I had been suppressing, "are 6 and 8 years old. And they sat here, patiently and politely, while their cousins, their aunt, their uncle, and their own grandmother were served a 3-course meal in front of them. They sat here and were told that their hunger didn't matter." I looked down at Leo and Maya. They were watching me, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. I gave them a reassuring wink. "But you know, my mother and brother-in-law are right," I announced to the room. They are absolutely right. My children have eaten before, and they will eat again, just not here. I gestured to Marco, who began to walk silently toward our table. You see, I've been acting as the host tonight, but it's become very clear that my mother, Margaret, is the true guest of honor. She and her real family, Chloe, David, and their children. My mother was white as a sheet. Elena, stop this. You are making a fool of yourself. No, Mother, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but the microphone carried every word. I'm just correcting a clerical error. Marco arrived at the table. He didn't look at me. He proceeded, with devastatingly professional calm, directly to my mother's side. My mother, Margaret, stared at him, bewildered. What is this? I didn't order anything. Your bill, madam, Marco said, his voice neutral. He placed the leather folder directly in front of her, next to her half-eaten plate of duck confit. The silence that followed was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the faint hiss of the amplifier. David was the first to break. He let out a choked, sputtering laugh. What is this, a joke? Elena, tell your little waiter friend to stop playing games. This is embarrassing. He's not my waiter friend, David, I said, still holding the microphone. He's the event lead, and he's just following instructions, my instructions. Chloe, finally sensing the magnitude of what was happening, looked frantic. Elena, what did you do? Just pay the bill, you're ruining everything. Pay the bill, I repeated, as if genuinely considering it. Why would I do that? I'm not a guest here. Neither are my children. We're just the people who were told to pack snacks. You, on the other hand, I gestured to the food in front of them, you all seem to be having a wonderful meal. The meal you selected. The wine you ordered. It seems only fair that you should be the one to pay for it. The first major reveal, the presentation of the bill, had shattered their comfortable, smug reality. But they still hadn't grasped the full picture. They still thought I was bluffing. My mother, summoning her matriarchal rage, finally spoke. Elena Marie, this is the most childish, selfish, and spiteful thing you have ever done. You invited us here. You offered to pay. I did, I agreed, nodding. I offered to pay for a family celebration. But this isn't a family celebration, is it? It's a banquet for your favorites at my expense, and I've decided I'm no longer willing to pay. David, realizing I was serious, lunged for the bill. He flipped it open. I will never, as long as I live, forget the look on his face. His arrogant smirk dissolved. His ruddy complexion turned a sickly, pale gray. His eyes bulged as he scanned the itemized list. The private room booking fee, the 20-person, 3-course meal, at $250 a head, the multiple bottles of $300 wine he had so cavalierly ordered, the floral arrangements, the cake. This is, he stammered, his voice a squeak, this is $11,000. I raised an eyebrow. 11,300 to be precise, I corrected him. You really should have stuck to the house wine, David. You can't do this, he shrieked, his voice cracking. He was on his feet now, jabbing a finger at me. You paid the deposit, you're on the contract, you are legally responsible. This was the moment, the confrontation, and his immediate reaction, the threats, the panic, was exactly what I expected. He wasn't worried about my mother's honor. He wasn't worried about my children. He was worried about his wallet. Ah, I said, tapping the microphone. That's the second part of my announcement. Marco, would you be so kind as to confirm? Marco, who had been standing patiently by, inclined his head. Of course, Ms. Elena, we spoke with our accounting department. The $5,000 deposit you placed on your credit card has been reallocated. David looked at him, uncomprehending. Reallocated, what does that mean? It means, I said, my voice bright and clear, that my deposit has been successfully applied as a gratuity for the entire staff. For Marco, and the chefs, and the waiters, who have all had to endure your lovely company tonight. Marco's impassive mask twitched, just for a second, into what might have been a smile. So, as you can see, I continued, my name is clear. My balance is 0. The remaining bill, the full $11,300, is now the responsibility of the current guests. And that would be you. David's poorly executed threats and obvious lies had evaporated. He was left with nothing but the cold, hard, itemized truth. He looked at my mother, his eyes wide with panic. "Margaret, do something, she's robbing us." My mother was frozen. She was staring at the bill as if it were a snake. This was a sum of money she simply did not have. Her entire lifestyle was a facade, funded by my father's meager life insurance and my own guilt-ridden subsidies. She had nothing. "Elena, please," my mother whispered. It was the first time in my life I had ever heard her beg. "You can't." I looked at her, at this woman who had, just 30 minutes ago, looked at her own hungry grandchildren with utter contempt. "I can," I said, "and I have." The immediate aftermath of the reveal was chaos. David, in a desperate attempt to regain control, began to bluster. "This is theft. I'm calling the police. You can't just assign a bill." "You're welcome to try," I said, gesturing with the microphone. "I'm sure the restaurant manager and perhaps the police would be very interested to hear your version of events. The one where you ordered food and wine for 20 people with no intention of paying for it, assuming your host, the one you refused to serve, would pick up the tab. How do you think that will play out for you, David?" His mouth snapped shut. He knew, and I knew, that he had no legal leg to stand on. The moment they accepted the food and service after I had been excluded, they implicitly accepted responsibility. My reallocation of the deposit was a masterstroke, a move so clean and professional they couldn't argue it. My sister Chloe finally burst into tears. "Elena, how could you?" she sobbed, mascara running down her cheeks. "This is Mom's 60th birthday. You've ruined it. You've ruined everything." She was still defending them, still clinging to the fantasy that I was the problem. "I ruined it?" I asked, my voice rising. This was it. This was the final case I had to build. "Let me be perfectly clear, Chloe. I didn't ruin this. I didn't refuse to feed 2 small children. I didn't sit here and smirk while they were told to pack snacks. I didn't create this. This toxic, tiered system where I am the family workhorse and you are the family princess." I turned my attention to the other side of the table, to David's family, who were all trying to become invisible. "And for all of you who have been sitting here watching this is the family you married into. A family where cruelty is the main course." I took a deep breath. It was time for the final, irrefutable proof, the one that would break the spell for good. "Mom," I said, my voice softening. She looked up, a desperate pathetic hope in her eyes. She thought I was about to relent. "Do you remember when Dad died? Do you remember his will?" Her face went rigid. "Don't you dare bring your father into this." "I have to," I said, "because he left me that small inheritance, the one you've resented for 20 years, the one you've always called my unfair advantage. But he also left you the house, the investments, the life insurance, all of it, a very comfortable nest egg." I walked over to my purse, which was still on my chair. I took out a single, folded piece of paper. I had brought it for a different reason, as a reference for the restaurant's address, but now it felt like destiny. "You've been crying poverty for a decade, Mom, borrowing from me for property taxes, for car repairs, for Chloe's emergencies. I've given you, by my last calculation, over $80,000, money I worked for, money that should have gone to my own children." I unfolded the paper. "This is a public records search I ran last week. I'm a project manager, Mom. I check the details. I was worried you were in debt, that someone was taking advantage of you." I held the paper up. "But you're not in debt, are you? You sold the house my father left you. You sold it 3 months ago, and you didn't tell me." Chloe gasped. "Mom, what is she talking about?" "You sold it," I continued, "for a significant profit. And then you let me book and pay for this $11,000 party. You sat there with hundreds of thousands of dollars in your bank account, and you watched my children go hungry." This was the final confrontation, the irrefutable proof. This wasn't just about a meal. It was about a lifetime of financial and emotional fraud. Chloe stared at our mother, her face a mask of dawning horror. "Mom, is that true? You sold the house." Margaret's face crumpled. She had been exposed. Her entire narrative of the put-upon widow was a lie. Her power, built on a foundation of manipulation and my guilt, dissolved in that instant. David, seeing his cash cow was a fraud, looked like he was going to be sick. His alliance with Margaret was purely transactional. The transaction had just been voided. "So, you see," I said, my voice now gentle, "I think you can handle this bill. Consider it the first of your own expenses you've had to cover in a very, very long time." This was the showdown. The public humiliation they had intended for me was now, justifiably, theirs. The room was a tableau of their downfall. David's parents were already gathering their coats, whispering to each other, their faces pinched with disapproval. They didn't even say goodbye. David himself was slumped in his chair, staring at the bill as if it were a death sentence. He was a man defeated, his arrogance completely stripped away, leaving only the weak, parasitic creature beneath. My mother, Margaret, was weeping, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage, the rage of a narcissist who had been publicly unmasked. And Chloe, my sister, she was the one I was watching. She was the manipulated one, the one still caught in the spell. She looked from me to our mother and back again. Her entire world, her perception of her perfect life, had just been shattered. "Elena," she whispered, and for the first time her voice was raw, stripped of its usual airy confidence. I didn't know." "I know," I said, and I did. Chloe was weak, not malicious. She was a product of our mother's design. It was in that moment that Chloe had her final, powerful realization. She looked at her husband, David, who was now frantically typing on his phone, probably checking his bank balance. She looked at her mother, who was sobbing into her napkin. Then she looked at my children, Leo and Maya, who were still sitting there, silent and watchful. Chloe stood up. Her movements were jerky, uncertain. She walked past her mother. She walked past her husband. She came over to my side of the table and knelt in front of Leo and Maya. "I am so sorry," she whispered to them, her voice thick with tears. "What Grandma and David did, it was wrong, it was so wrong." She then stood up and faced our mother. "Mom," she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength, I'm done. I can't do this anymore." It was a decisive, triumphant action. It was the moment she finally broke free. She had chosen me, she had chosen decency. I felt a surge of, not triumph but relief. I had not just saved myself, I had saved my sister too. I placed the microphone gently on the table. The thump of it echoed again, a final punctuation mark. "Well," I said, "it's been an evening. We will be leaving now." I bent down and helped Maya out of her high chair. I took Leo's hand. "Come on, babies, let's go get some real food." My mother looked up, her face a mess of tears and rage. "Elena, you will not do this. You will not walk out on your family." I paused at the door. I Ked back at her, this small, diminished woman, surrounded by the wreckage of her own creation. "Family," I said. "You're right, I would never walk out on my family." I held my children's hands tighter, which is why we're leaving. I didn't look back as I pushed the door open. I walked out of that opulent, suffocating room, leaving them to face the consequences. The staggering bill, the judgment of the staff, and the irreparable fracture of the image they had worked so hard to maintain. As the door clicked shut behind me, I heard the first strains of a new, louder argument erupting between my mother and David. But it was distant. It was muffled. It wasn't my problem anymore. The air in the restaurant's main lobby felt cool and fresh. I led my children out the grand, revolving doors and onto the street. The city lights were bright, and the sound of traffic was a welcome, normal noise. "Mommy," Leo asked, his small voice still trembling a little, "are Grandma and Uncle David in trouble?" I knelt in front of him on the sidewalk. I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Yes, honey, they are. They were very, very unkind. And when people are that unkind, they have to face the consequences." Are we in trouble? Maya asked, her eyes wide. I pulled them both into a hug, burying my face in their hair. They smelled like sweet shampoo and the crisp night air. No, my loves, we are not in trouble. We are free. My phone started ringing in my purse. I saw Chloe's name flash on the screen. I silenced it. I would talk to her, but not tonight. Tonight was for us. I looked up and down the street. Across the way, there was a small, brightly lit pizzeria. Who wants pizza? I asked. Their faces lit up. Me. We crossed the street, and I ordered the largest pepperoni pizza they had, plus 3 root beers. We slid into a red vinyl booth, and the kids giggled as they played with the straws in their drinks. When the pizza came, steaming hot on a metal tray, it felt like the most luxurious meal I had ever had. We ate with our hands. We laughed. I watched Leo explain the rules of his favorite video game to Maya. I watched Maya get cheese all over her face. I felt a sense of peace settle over me, so profound and so complete that it almost made me want to cry, but this time with relief. There was no more striving, no more trying to earn love that was never on offer, no more setting myself on fire to keep them warm. The downfall of Margaret and David was definitive. Chloe did call me the next day. She told me, through tears, that David's parents had left in disgust, that my mother, in a panic, had admitted to the house sale. That David, upon realizing she had money, had demanded she pay the $11,300 bill, which she did, wiping out a significant chunk of her secret fund in one go. Their alliance, built on my exploitation, crumbled the second they were forced to turn on each other. Chloe was starting her own journey. She was looking for an apartment for herself and her kids. She was terrified, but she was also awake for the first time in her life. I told her I would be there for her, as a sister. I used my professional network to find her a good, aggressive divorce lawyer, ensuring that David's financial dependence would be fully documented. Justice, I found, was best served with precision. Tonight, though, in this pizzeria, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the weight of Maya's head on my shoulder as she started to fall asleep, and the proud look on Leo's face as he finished his third slice. I was vindicated. I had protected my children and reclaimed my life. I had finally, truly, packed my own snacks.